ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोन् श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं श्रीकृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्तकाञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। नमो महावदान्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायिने कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नामिने गौरत्विषे नमः। पञ्चतत्त्वात्मकं कृष्णं भक्तरूपस्वरूपकं भक्तावतारं भक्ताख्यं नमामि भक्तशक्तिकं। श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। जन्माद्यस्य तोन्मयादितरतश्चार्थेषुभिज्ञस्वराट् तेने ब्रह्म हृदय आदिकवये मुह्यन्ति यत्सूरयः। तेजो वारिमृदां यथा विनिमयो यत्र त्रिसर्गो मृषा धाम्ना स्वेन सदा निरस्तकुहकं सत्यं परं धीमहि। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। स्वस्ति अस्तु विश्वस्य खलः प्रसीदतां ध्यायन्तु भूतानि शिवं मिथो धिया मनश्च भद्रं भजता दधोक्षजे आवेश्यतां नो मतिरप्यहेतुकी। So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, chapter number 2, verse number 9 and 10. This is spoken by Vishnu Dutas in response to the Yamdutas. Listen, Stenaha Surapo Mitra Dukh Brahmaha Guru Talpada Stviraj Pitrigohanta Yecha Patakino Pare Sarvesham Apyagvatam Idam Eva Sumiskritam Nam Yaharanam Vishnuryatas-tadvishyamatihi. Says that whether somebody is a thief, a drunkard, one who betrays friendship, killer of a brahmana, or one has sex with the teacher's wife, killer of a woman, a king, one's parents, or a cow, or any other sinful person. This indeed is the supreme atonement for all such sinful activities, that one chants the name of Lord Vishnu, which attracts the attention of the Lord towards the chanter. So this is the greatness of the name, that it makes the Lord give his attention towards the person who chants it. And attention, as we read in the commentary, is in the sense that I need to protect this person because he belongs to me. He has name. So while discussing this, it was commented here that because the chanting of the name destroys all the sins, so the sins of Ajamila, the person who was calling this, were destroyed from the very first day when he named his son as Narayana, because he was calling him. Even when he was small, Narayan, come here, sit in my lap, Narayan, do this, Narayan, do that. So then the objection was raised that this last chanting was necessary for him, because whatever sins he has performed after chanting the name, they need to be absolved, because he will chant the name and then he will again do sinful activities. Then he will chant again, so it will be nullified. But when he was dying, between that moment and the last chanting, if he has committed any sinful activity, then he needed to chant once more. Otherwise he has to suffer for that. So Vishwanath Chakravarti, he commented that actually is not true. The very first name when he chanted, that itself destroyed all his past and also the future sins. And any other chanting which he did after that just was part of devotion. Because one chanting of the name destroys so many sins that it is not possible for one to commit sins which can outweigh the power of the name. Because the chanting of the name can uproot the very tendency to commit sin. And if the tendency is uprooted, then where is the question of doing sin after that? So then the question was raised that if that is the case, then why he was still engaged in sinful activities? Right? That was the question raised by Manjari. That you are saying that when he chanted for the first time, he became free from the sinful tendency. But that was not seen in his behavior. He still continued to live with that woman and continue in his own sinful activities of plundering, looting, stealing, telling lies or whatever, drinking liquor. So this is being discussed here now. Nanu tarhi pratham nam grahana anantaram eva ajamilena nirvidya tatha katam na apsritam papa praroha abhavepi tasyam eva dasyam asajya tattadeva papam tavat kal paryantam pratyutkritam. So he says that if he became free from all the sinful tendencies by chanting the name Narayana from the very first day when he named him, then why he did not become dispassionate and leave the house? But how can he stay there then? Because he has no more sinful tendencies now. But from the story we know that he remained very much attached to that woman who was actually a prostitute. And he continued performing all other sinful activities which he was doing, which he was habituated to. So then how can you say that his tendencies were removed? Right? This was your question. So he says Uchyate, he says, we answer it. Sanskar vasat jivan muktanam karmaiva tasyapi tavat kal paryantam tattadeva papam punah punarutpadyamanam. So this is little hard to understand, but to make you understand, we give you another example. Then you will understand. Suppose instead of being sinful, he was a very pious man, as he was to begin with, right? He was very obedient to his parents, truthful, well behaved, compassionate, doing good to others, not talking too much, and following all his duties. This is how he was described. And now in that state, if he would have chanted the name of God, he would have become liberated, right? Because a sinful person can become liberated, then a pious person will also become liberated. But then you will not ask the question, well, if he became liberated, then why was he still continuing his previous life? Suppose he chanted the name of Lord and he became liberated, and he continued being a nice person, compassionate, doing his seva to the parents. You will not say why he did not leave the house and go to the forest. Right? This question people will not ask. Right? You will rather expect that he should continue doing it. So, just as if a pious person becomes liberated and he continues doing his pious deeds, but that piety does not affect him. In the same way, if a sinful person becomes liberated, he continues doing the sinful activities and those sins don't affect him. Because their life is just going by their samskaras.
So what is the difference then? The difference is the intent of the person and their activities after being liberated, or what is the difference in their actions that makes them liberated after chanting?
What is the difference between a pious person who has become liberated
Yes.
and a normal pious person?
Yes.
What is the difference?
Well, the liberated person is no longer bound by the reactions of his action.
Same with it. Okay, let me ask you another question. Let's suppose you become liberated. Well, let's not suppose you are liberated. Before you got liberated,
Thank you.
you liked pasta, right? And when you become liberated, will you stop liking pasta and you will only like chapatis and dal rice, or you will still like pasta?
You like that? I will still like pasta.
Right? Because that is your samskar. And that liking your pasta has nothing to do whether you are liberated or not liberated. It's just a samskara. It's not that some person becomes liberated, now he will not like rice because he was used to eating rice before. He will still continue eating rice.
So what would a person do?
Or just to tell you, give you another example. Let's suppose there is a cup which is made from iron, and then you touch it with a touchstone, and then it turns into gold. Will it change its shape? It will still maintain its shape of the cup, although now it is golden cup, but the shape is same. So in the same way, when somebody becomes liberated, the samskaras, he can just follow samskaras, no problem. Just like, also example of fan is given. You have a fan, it's running, and then you stop, you switch it off, then it continues still running for some time because of the samskara. This is also a type of samskara, right? In science they call it, what do they call it? There is a word for that. When something, it takes a type of energy, I forget now. Somebody is very technical name? Kinetic energy? No. Momentum.
Yeah.
It has gained momentum.
Mm.
And then by that momentum it continues. Although there is no more electricity in it, which means that it is liberated from its job. Previously what was making it function, it's not there, but the momentum continues. And it may look like as if it was before, and you don't see any difference, but there is a difference. So in the same way, Ajamila, although he got liberated when he chanted the name very first time, but he continued doing his nonsense because of the sanskaras. But now this nonsense does not have an influence on him because he is out of the law of karma.
So means that these activities, they don't create further sanskar?
No.
What would it take for somebody in this position of a Jamil to lose the benefit of his actions not having any reaction in karma?
Somebody else? What would it take?
How long does it take for the fan to stop?
Yeah.
That's
What I want to know is that, okay, so he's liberated from chanting Namadas, and his simple actions after that, they don't incur any reaction.
Right.
But is there anything that can stop that benefit
Which benefit?
of not having reaction to your
No, offense.
offense?
Yeah.
Yes.
If he commits offense, then he has to suffer from that. He will still not fall under the law of karma, but he can suffer because of the offense. That is the only danger. So that also he will discuss. Actually this commentary which Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is marvelous. He doesn't leave any questions unanswered. So he will try to show that Ajamila actually was free from offense.
You're in that long comment.
Yeah.
Now how can we be free of offense if he's an enjoyer, basically?
No, enjoying is one thing and offense is another thing. Because he was free. Offenses are committed when you are a devotee. He is not a devotee.
But what's the use of being liberated if your mind is still running on bad samskaras? If I'm a thief, or a meat eater or whatever, and then I'm somehow liberated in the way that the Jami was, but I continue on with my old samskara, what's the use of being liberated? What is the point? What is my liberation worth?
Well, your liberation is worth that once you give up this body, then you will not do these things. Then you will not continue. When the body is
So
given.
we're not there to test. We can't test this one scientifically.
Scientifically, there's nothing you can test. It's something to be experienced by oneself. That is the only scientific test.
The only thing that I could think that liberation would be good for is bhakti. If you have a bhakti samskara, then it's worth being liberated. But if you have no bhakti samskara, then what's the point?
Actually, the point here is not that one should emulate this or this is to be followed. It's to show the power of the name. That is the point which is being made. And that should be understood. Not that something like this happens to people in general. It doesn't happen like that. This is a very special case to prove the power of name. It's like when they do certain tests, when they invent a new medicine, and then they want to see the effect of that medicine. So what they do is that they have to experiment on people with a controlled environment. That nothing else should influence, only the influence of this medicine is to be seen, to show that this is how it works. But if there are other factors working, then you don't know who influenced it.
Mm-hmm.
So here it is to show there is a person here who is doing all types of nonsense. But one thing is there, that he is free from offense. And then you can see that the power of the name works to remove all this nonsense. But if the offense is there, then it won't work like this, which is the case in general. Everybody.
Yeah.
Then you don't see it like this. So this is to show how the Namabhas can remove all the sins. But Namabhas will not remove the aparadha, the offense. So this is a very specific case to show it. So my favorite example is of green grass and dry grass. So in the grass, there is a haystack which is completely dry. You put a matchstick, it will burn everything. But if it is wet, although this matchstick has the same power to burn the grass, but it won't burn. First it has to dry it. So in the same way, when we are chanting, first we have to get rid of the offenses and then it will burn. So in his case, he was dry fellow. He was just ready for the matchstick.
In previous lives.
So that's what is being shown here.
Some suffering is also there, no? When someone is doing such nonsense.
Suffering?
Suffering, some mental suffering, some...
Yes. That can also be external. You see, suffering is two ways. One is that there is something happening and then you are associating with it. So it can happen to the body and the problem. And that is also going with the samskaras, he says, because he was also fearful. So he's just following the samskaras. Like a person who is having a nightmare and then he wakes up. And even when he wakes up, he is still in that state of nightmare. So although he is out of it, but he still continues to suffer till he gets out of this. So something like that. Badhita anuvritti.
What?
It's called Badhita anuvritti.
Oh, Badhita anuvritti. That's it. Badhita.
So it is that kind of state. So it's very interesting.
Okay. I didn't hear any of it much.
So he says, Punar punar utpadyamanam api utkhata danstro uraga dansavan na phalajanakam. So it does not give any result, all these activities. And this is compared to the bite of a snake whose fangs have been removed. Like we have these snake charmers in India, so they keep pet snakes. But they remove their teeth, the fangs. So you have seen them how the snake are trying to bite you. You go near them. And that has no effect because there are no fangs. So like that, these activities of Ajamila, which seemingly were sinful, were not giving him any bad reaction because he is immune to it. Kimva, then he gives another answer, which is maybe more digestible. Matantara अर्थाता भावार्थम भगवता एव पाप बीजा भावेपि पुनः पापे प्रवर्तनम भवेत् इत्येवं व्याख्यायम्. Or he says that actually he became liberated, and after becoming liberated he should have stopped doing all this nonsense. But God did not want. He wanted that he continues doing it. And the reason for this is so that the other paths, the path of karma, path of jnana, path of yoga, they are not uprooted. They can continue. Otherwise, what will happen? That nobody will take to this path. They will say, look at Ajamila, he chanted Narayan, once he became liberated, let's all follow this. So to protect these paths, he makes devotees look like as if nothing has changed in them. They are same as before, they continue doing same nonsense, but actually they are liberated.
Oh, that explains a lot.
So don't underestimate Jagdanam. You really don't know what he is.
Radhesh.
Everyone has their role.
Oh.
So that's why we should not. You should be careful in passing comments on devotees.
Radhesh.
So अन्यथा स्तुति अर्थवादे कल्पनांतरे वा व्याख्यायमाने तथार्थवादो हरिनाम्नि कल्पनम इति पात्मोक्त नाम अपराध प्रसक्तो. So he says, otherwise if you don't explain like this, there is one nyaya called Anyatha Anupatti Nyaya, that there is no other go, this is the only way you have to explain, because if you don't explain it this way, then you have to somehow explain these statements. Well, it says that chanting the name is the best atonement. So if it does not have its real meaning, then it has a secondary meaning, which means it's just to praise it falsely. It doesn't really mean, it's just to attract people to Bhakti Yoga. So if you do that, then that is one way of saying. Means you don't have to take them in their primary sense. You take them in their secondary sense. So this is a very big issue, hermeneutics. How to understand the scriptural statements, because they say something, we don't see it that way. So either the statement is wrong or it has another explanation. So if the statement says that Steno Surapo Mitradham Brahmaha Guru Talpuge Striraj Pitri Gohanta Yecha Patikinopre Sarvashamapi Agavatam Idameva Suniskritam Nam Viharanam Vishnu Yatastad Vishyamati. So either this statement is wrong, or we have to give a secondary meaning, or we have to take it in its primary sense. So we cannot say it is wrong because Vishnu Dutas are speaking. Why they have to speak wrong? They actually came there and they descended. There was no need. Why they have to come to protect him? And then there are two possibilities. Either we take it in the primary sense or we take it in the secondary sense. They are just a praise of the name. There is always a tendency to exaggerate when we are praising somebody. Especially if you are in the sabha, on some platform you praise, then you always magnify, right?
Sometimes excessively.
Yeah.
You don't want to make enemies, but anyway, go ahead.
So maybe it is just an exaggeration. So then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that it is not, because there are statements to counter that don't consider them as exaggeration. And he says, Tatharthvado harinamni kalpanam. It is one of the offense against the name to consider them as arthavad, which means a praise or exaggeration. So it is forbidden. So that means you have to take these statements in their primary meaning. And if you have to take them in their primary meaning, then you have to give an explanation. Because you see the behavior of Ajamila, which does not match at all to a person who is a devotee, who is liberated. And then we have statements that he is free from sins. In fact, he is completely immune to anything sinful. But his behavior is absolutely sinful. So how are we going to see this? How are we going to accommodate this? They have to accommodate it. So therefore he says that there are two explanations he gives. One is that he's just going on with the samskaras. Because if one becomes liberated, it does not mean that one's life comes to an end. He has to still live normal life. And then obviously we will think, well, if he is liberated, what is he going to do? Obviously, is he going to do some good deeds or bad deeds? So we would expect that he will perform some good deeds. Because that's the idea, that somebody who is liberated wisely. So that is expected. But in this particular case it did not happen because he did not get liberated by performing any sadhana consciously. That is the point. Usually people become liberated because they engage in some sadhana consciously. They understand philosophy, they understand what is sin, what is... and I want to get rid of it. They consciously avoid sinful activities. So that means they try to bring a change in their life. But Ajamila is not a case like that. Ajamila was not performing any sadhana. He did not chant the name of the Lord as a spiritual practice. In fact, he did not even chant the name of Lord. He only called for his son. So therefore it is expected that his behavior is not going to change suddenly like that. Which also shows that your behavior does not change just automatically. There is also a story of Mrigari described in the Puranas, which is referred in Chaitanya Charitamrita. This Mrigari, he was killing animals. Not even killing, he was just torturing them. And then Narada preached to him. He stopped and he started chanting. And then he became so non-violent that once when Narada Rishi came to see him, he was not ready to step on the ants. So in his case, he was performing it as a conscious sadhana. He was chanting the name of the Lord. He also understood that I should not be violent. So his behavior changed. Ajamila is a case where it is happening without him consciously making an effort.
Or knowing it.
Yeah, that's what I mean, consciously. He's not engaging in any spiritual practice. So this is just to show that how the name can work. What is the power of name? Actually it is power of namabhas.
So how much more?
How much more? So that is the Kamutya Nyaya. That how much more it will be powerful when you actually engage in the chanting. That is the message. So this is very amazing story, this story of Ajamila. When you think of it and when you meditate it, it's really amazing that it's mind-boggling that how much power the name must have. So just like As I gave the example that if you see a plastic snake, you get scared. So how much fearful it will be when actually there is a snake. If the snake creeps into this room, you will all become very alert. You will not put your feet on the floor. So even plastic snake is scary, so how much scary is the real snake? If I close the door and put one snake and say you can spend the night here, you won't fall asleep. Especially if there is no bed. Sleep on the mat. So that is to show, and this is what you call viparit udaharan, opposite example, that how much powerful and beautiful and enchanting is the name, that it attracted the attention of the Supreme Lord when he was not even called. It was only the Son he was calling. And that was able to make the Lord attentive. So how much he will be really attentive when you call out of love.
There's also, I was just, as you were saying that, I was reminded of a verse that I don't know where it comes from, and I don't remember the Sanskrit, but it says that Krishna, when he hears Ra, the first syllable, or just if he hears the first syllable, his ears prick up. And then he's immediately attentive. And then when he hears the Dha, then he immediately comes
It's
to...
a fact. I mean, you are walking on the road and somebody says Jagat, you immediately become attentive. Although he may be talking about Jagat mein kuch nahi hai, right? But as soon as you hear the word, even Jaga, you become attentive. So it's like that. And especially if you love somebody, Krishna loves Radha, so as soon as he hears Ra, because he's already thinking of Ra, It's already there. There's one story, I think, in this book, that once Krishna went to, Nanda Maharaj went to see Vrishbhanu, and Krishna was small, so he went with his father. And when he saw Radha, he wants to say Radha, but he cannot say, because what these elders will think. So there was a parrot, he goes to the parrot and he's telling the parrot, say Dhara, Dhara. So the parrot starts saying Dhara, Dhara, Radha. So this is what he wants to say, but what can he do? He cannot call him.
Because the Dara turns into Radha.
So he's making the parrot say it. So that is the power of the name. So therefore he says Tatharthvado Hari Namni Kalpanam, that you should not think that this is an Arthavada. That I don't know whether he is going to talk about there are three types of Arthavadas. There is a Gunavada, Gunanuvada, Bhutarthamuvada.
Don't ask me to do any of this stuff.
They describe three types of Arthavada.
Okay.
One is what is called? The first one I forgot the name. One is Gunanuvada, there is Bhutarthavada, and there is another. So anyway, they give examples of those three. Let me see, maybe we have. So Padmokta Namaparada Prasakto Namnopi Sarvashruhido hi Aparadhat Patati Adhaiti. So he says, another one he quotes that although name is Sarvasruhida, he is friendly to everybody. Because he is Lord himself. But even name is upset if you commit an offense. Although he is the benefactor, he is compassionate. But It says Namno api sarva suhrida. Is most dear. Suhrida means bosom friend, which means one who akaran hitkari, one who does welfare to you without any cause, which means without any expectation. Usually people do something to you because they are looking for a favor from you. That's the natural human tendency. So name is not like that, because their name has nothing to gain from you. So he is a Sarva Suhrida, he is everybody's friend, and as we can see, even Ajamila got the benefit. But if one is offensive, aparadhat patati adha, he, nishchit, surely, one will become degraded if one is offensive. So this is the thing which one has to be very, very careful in relation to name, not to be offensive to it. Arthavadam harer namni sambhavayati yo nara sapapishto manushyanam nirye patati sputam viti. So he says that one who imagines that there is arthavad in the description of the glories of the name, means it is all praise, it is not real. So then what happens? He says that person is very sinful. Just as the name takes away all the sins, even if chanted indirectly, unconsciously. But the opposite is also true. Some medicine which is very powerful, that can cure your disease just one dose, if taken wrongly, it can also harm you, but that has its power in it. So name is very powerful, as we see in the case of Ajamila, that he became purified. So if one criticizes the name, that it doesn't have all that power, then it acts also badly, then such person is the papishta, most sinful, and definitely goes to hell, suffers. So we have to be careful, because it is such a powerful thing. It's like you have fire, it's very powerful and very useful, it can also be very dangerous. So he says, sa papishto manusyanam, he says such a person who thinks that these statements are not real is the most sinful among the human beings. There is no more person. There is no one who is more sinful than such a person. Mannama kirtan phalam vividham nisamya nasraddadhati manute yadutarthavadam yamanusastamiha dukkhachaye kshipami sansara ghor vividharti nipirtangam.
Is that from the same Padma Purana?
I didn't say maybe. So he says that after hearing the fruit of chanting my name, Mannam Kirtan Phalam Vividham Nisamya, hearing various types of results which it gives, and still one does not put one's faith in it. Nasraddadhati manuse yadutarthavadam, rather thinks this is an arthavada, it is just praise and glorification. So that is very dangerous. That's why it is said that one should not unnecessarily try to explain the glory of name to people who are not interested in listening, because you are making that person commit offense. And you are also committing offense because you are instrumental in it. So one who is not Asushrusha, who is not having the desire to hear. So we have to know this. Not that unnecessarily, like now they are putting all these mics here in Vrindavan and doing kirtan. They are also doing offense. And then people may be sleeping, they are not interested in hearing now. You are causing disturbance, and then they may get angry because it's a name. But then you get upset. Now why this nonsense? So that they are also being instrumental in being offensive by doing that. And then they themselves, if you go, they are not listening. They put the mic on top of the building and inside
They
they are
can't hear
sleeping.
anything.
They don't hear it. But they're disturbing everybody around.
Well, in view of all that you've just said, it becomes almost impossible, let's say, to avoid offenses. I mean, offenses are there all the time. And also, it seems that a very, very passive role, one would have to hide oneself away into a closet and stay there without ever coming out in order to avoid committing offenses.
With big earplugs.
Well, whatever. You know, but I mean, this is like you. So, what's the remedy?
Well, remedy is that at least we should not do it consciously. Which we can avoid, we should avoid. If it is unavoidable, nothing we can do about it. As Krishna says, tasmad aparihari arte natam sochitum arhasi. You don't have to lament or
Something is inevitable.
which is inevitable. So we should not do something knowingly, that is very dangerous. Cannot be forgiven. So if I know that this is wrong, I should not do that. If it is within my means to stop it, I should stop. So therefore he says that Yo manushas tamhe dukhchaya chipami. The Lord, it seems Lord himself is saying that such a person, I throw him into the pile of misery. Sansar ghor vividharti nipidit angam. That he will suffer terrible miseries, various types, vividharti nipidit in this samsara. So he says, iti Shruti Smriti Puranesu Nam Mahatmya Vadesu. So he says, these are so many statements.
Nowadays, people don't like to hear about hell, especially not in the Western countries.
Okay, hell means suffering, that's all. Doesn't mean, don't consider that this is a specific place. Hell is a word for suffering, that's all. Atraya Mata Sarvo Nako. Kapila said, my mother, hell and heaven are right here. Atraya. So, let's not go into some specific place called heaven and hell. Enjoyment is heaven, suffering is hell. Yes.
Now, I would like to understand this liberation from just Dasa only, because I'm seeing it in terms of we all have past lives, right? And we understand that someone who's a devotee in this life is more than likely a devotee in the previous life. And in that previous life they would have done something, have some sadhana and chanted the holy name. But then people, they also, you see that devotees in their present life, they brought something with them from their previous life. I hope you can follow me. That shows that there's something in the previous life that is still happening in this life, in the next life. Do you understand me?
Mm.
Right? So what what is the situation there with being liberated? Because if they're liberated in their previous life and then they're taking another birth, and in that birth they're still undergoing things from the previous birth that they need to purify from themselves, attachments to different things.
No, that means they are not liberated, and that is because there must be some offenses
Gotcha.
which is making them take birth. So they have to get free from that offense. So it has to be, and by saying anyathanutpatti nyaya, that since there is no other explanation, then it is to be presumed that they must have committed offense, because of which they have to take birth again. And unless they get free from the offense, they are not going to get out of the material world.
And so the type of offense that would do that would be all kinds of offense to the name, to other entities.
Mainly the name, namaparad.
Mainly the name.
Yeah, because all other aparadhas, all other types of offenses, they are dissolved by chanting the name.
Mm-hmm.
But offense to name, that has to be avoided.
And being dissolved by the power of the name, the other offences, that's none of us?
No. Namabhas is not removing offenses.
Right,
Anyway,
so
to be
it's
free of the
more than
offenses, you have to have a fairly sophisticated understanding of Vaishnava philosophy and practice.
You see, this whole thing is, although chanting of the names looks very simple
that.
process, but it is involving a lot of human psychology. And that's what makes it very alive process. It is not mechanically. Here it is shown mechanically. Again, I am repeating this because we don't want to do it consciously. It is shown as a mechanical process having influence to show its power, so that we become interested that if it is so powerful, I must take to this. That is the idea. But then the other things also have to be understood, and we have discussed that there are many stories in Bhagavatam related with offense. Vritrasura's story is coming soon. After this we have done story of Daksha. How he committed offense and he lost his head. Finally he has to get a goat head. That is the outcome of offense. It's a very serious affair. So these stories are there. Then we have the story of Indradyumna, king, becomes Gajendra. Right? So these are all stories related with offenses. And what happens. There is a story of Nalkubar and Manigriva. They were cursed. So we have to study the offense very minutely. And that's where the whole human psychology comes, because what does offense means? Upsetting somebody. And upsetting somebody means we have to know the person's mind, what makes that person upset. Because God is a person. That is the whole thing. And so it works both ways. Because he is a person, therefore we can call him by his name. And because he is a person, he also has his likes and dislikes. And because he also has his dislikes, we have to know that very minutely. If we want to, just like if you want to love somebody, you don't want to do anything which will displease that person. Right? Same thing has to be practiced here.
You have to know the mind of God.
So we have to actually know the mind of God. Both ways, if you want to please him, then also you have to know Anukulyana Krishna Anusivana.
Well, I think is that in the case of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we don't have to know God, we have to know Krishna.
Right. I'm using the word God, but
I know, but it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing.
Specifically, we have to know Krishna. So we have to know his mind. And knowing his mind means knowing everything, basically. What is outside that?
Not only one, but different versions also. After all.
So that's why this is the complete education. That's why it is said that bhakti is a essence of samvit and Lad. Samvit means knowledge. That's what it means. That. So all this minute analysis, when you see the activities of the gopis with Krishna, then very fine analysis is done in the commentaries, what they are saying and what Krishna is saying and why it is said and why this word is used. It's very interesting how every word has got such a significance there. Actually these words are not replaceable. Even if there are some synonyms for those words, you can't use that. So beautiful. So just as in the Vedas, you cannot replace a word because they have their intonation. And their kram part, and ghata part, jata part, and ghan part, and all this. It keeps. Here we don't have that, but just by the meaning, it's very specific how they are used.
Yeah, but how we kind of living beings we can change that.
That's why bhakti is rare. I understand.
And there's so many different kinds of bhakti. Because you
Especially
have rasa charva. We call that charva. This is,
Now I wanted to make sure that I understood if somebody is sleeping in the night and wakes up because of some mics chanting the name, and that person is upset because he woke up, is that an offense of that person?
No, it's not an offense, but if you say that what is nonsense chanting going on.
but you see, the person who's playing, he's a Vaishnava. And if you wake up, you say, why that damn Mahanta in the next door ashram is always playing this music? And then you commit Vaishnava for that.
This is a very big, that's why a real Vaishnava acts in such a way that he does not make others commit offense. Not only that, he doesn't commit offense. You see, the Vaishnava mind works how minutely. That not only that they don't commit offense, they behave in such a way that others don't commit offense because of they are so careful. So it's a fact that like that.
During Kartik, last Kartik, in Radhakund, someone took it on as their Kartik Vrat to get on the other side of the loud speaker, very loud one, starting at 2 a.m. in the morning. They're not stopping till about 8 a.m. And I was one of the main recipients, the first main recipient.
For your benefit.
Well, when you're talking about bad thoughts, I don't want to repeat the thoughts I had.
You should have jumped with your clothes on if you
Well, I have that kind of thoughts. I have quite common because I am on the third floor and I get sounds from every side. Just few days ago somebody was doing it.
actually it's not too bad. It's worse in Radhakund because Radhakund is small. Radhakund is pretty, you have always, and then you have this fellow there in Gora Nagar. Gordhan. There you have that Gordhan temple.
Yes.
They're always playing music also.
And just at the time that, like we start at 2 a.m.
Exactly. When you want to be doing silent meditation, when you want to be doing Namasmaran, when you want to be doing Vilasmaran. And then they're coming and they're going, and it's, sometimes it's like a 6-year-old girl, or, a 6-year-old boy.
Yeah, then chanting with little tune or raga is one thing, and just making noise, basically.
This is not rasa.
It's very interesting.
Actually, just the other day someone was saying to me, that he was saying this actually about Western devotees. He was saying until really they start, that you can only appreciate Vraja Bhav. You can only appreciate Vrindavana Bhav when you start to actually get the rasa out of the words themselves. It's not just the meaning, but when you get into poetry, in other words, when it becomes poetry, then it becomes rasa. If it's not poetry, it's not rasa. If it's not music, then it's not rasa, because the person who is singing, he hasn't tasted it. He hasn't tasted the name. The name is combined with music.
I have very good earplugs.
Yeah, I'm sure you did more than good earphones.
Earphones.
No, I know the situation in the other thing.